everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today I'd like to discuss being new in the BDSM community, or rather, how do you know when you're no longer new? And to be honest, this is something I have tried to talk about so many times. This is the third time I am filming this video all the way through. I have written and scrapped so many outlines for this, and I'm really hoping I'm going to say something in here that makes sense, that resonates with somebody, and if it does, please let me know down in the comment section below, and if it doesn't, I guess also let me know down in the comment section below, because that's how the internet works. But when it comes to being new, and when it comes to our ideas of being experienced, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. I originally tried to approach this doing a very wide spectrum of the BDSM world, thinking about not only just S-types, but also with D-types, also with switches. And I realized that that was a bit of a disservice because I can really only speak from my experience being an S-type. And when it comes to being a switch or being a D-type, it is likely that your process is going to be quite different. So unfortunately, I can't necessarily speak to that experience, but hopefully some of the things and some of the questions I bring up during this video will also be things that you can use, kind of maybe reflected in a little bit of a different way to match what your experience is more closely. So I just want to make sure everyone is aware, obviously I'm one person. I can really only speak from what I've done in BDSM, and I don't want to try and speak for other people of other identities and other ways of doing BDSM. And like I mentioned, again, this is a very subjective process. I mean, we can look at somebody who's been in the scene for a day and say they're probably new, and look at somebody who's been doing this for 30 years and say they're probably not new, but everything between that is a big gray area. I know people in my community who have been doing this for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and they would still call themselves new. But I also know people who have been doing this for 2 years, and they're educators and they travel the country talking to people about BDSM, and I would hope that if they're educators and they're being vetted properly, that they would be considered experienced. So there must be something here that's not just a one-size-fits-all process. And when it comes to kink, we don't have like a BDSM university, we don't have diplomas, we don't have a certification process, we don't have accreditation for like approved educational BDSM facilities or whatever. Like, we don't really have anything where we can point and say, hey, I did this accredited program and I completed it, and that means I'm a level 2 BDSMer. Like, we don't have anything like that, and I don't really know how beneficial that would be if we did have something like that. But point being is, it's not as easy as it is in some other areas of life to make that distinction between being new and being experienced. And so what I want to do here is ask you guys some questions that you can use to self-evaluate and determine a little bit better where you are on your kink journey. But before I get into that aspect of the video, I just want to talk a little bit more about what it means to be new, what it means to be experienced in the kink community, and some misconceptions that go along with that. When we say the word experienced, I think there's two ways of thinking about it. There's experienced in the sense that you've done something a large number of times. So if you've done something 100 times, you're probably experienced with it in the sense that you've just been exposed to it through a lot of repetition. But then there's also a kind of experience that has the connotation of having gained deeper knowledge, of having gone through a deeper learning process. And when I say experienced, I more mean going through and having had that deeper learning, because there is the potential that you could have done something a large number of times, but if you're not sitting back and reflecting on that, if you're not learning from your experiences, if you are not, kind of just doing that good introspection practice, you might be in a different place from somebody who hasn't been doing this for as long, but has really taken a lot of time to digest everything that's happening to them. And I mean, not everybody has to sit down with a journal and, catalog all of their experiences and meditate on that. I'm not saying that everybody needs to do that, but if you haven't really gone through the process of consciously learning about yourself and about kink, you probably haven't really transitioned into that experience place. One of the big misconceptions I see, especially among people that happen to participate in things like impact play or rope bondage, is that they have to do increasingly intense forms of play in order to be experienced. Like things like light bondage or spankings are more for like newbies and are like soft play, and if you're a real masochist or like a true rope bottom, you're eventually going to move into and like graduate to these increasingly more complex and more intense forms of play. And so people believe that, okay, in order to be experienced, I must be able to do a scene where I can do a multi-part transition suspension sequence, or I must be able to take a non-stop spanking for an hour, or I must be able to take 100 lashings from a whip. And I don't really think that that's true. I can kind of see why maybe people might make that connection, because when it comes to more intense forms of play, you will see more people in the dungeons doing that when they are experienced. Like, it's not generally something that a new person will dive into, but they're not doing it only because it's something that has a connotation of being more experienced, right? The reason why maybe they've moved into that sort of play is not because this is what experienced people do, but because they have developed the trust over a long period of time with a partner, with themselves, really practice and hone their negotiation skills so they know exactly what they want to be able to do these more complicated scenes. And honestly, what ends up happening is oftentimes because new people feel like they have to be able to do these scenes in order to no longer be considered just a newbie, or, you know, to be like a real pain slut or whatever. Like, they get into scenes that they're not actually really mentally and physically prepared for yet, because they want to move out of like the basic beginner, you know, newbie scenes, because it has a little bit more of a negative connotation for some people because they feel that pressure to move out of it, and then they end up hurting themselves. It might mean that they don't participate in BDSM anymore, and that's really sad. I think we really need to keep in mind that kink is about things that are fulfilling to us, fulfilling for our partners, and obviously based around what we negotiate for. And people who have been doing BDSM for 10, 15 years longer still go back and do the basic beginner scenes. You know, it could just be purely enjoyable for them. Like, sensation play is great. It's not just for new people. Light spankings are great. They're not just for new people. Light bondage is great. It's not just for new people. Like, all of these things should not be restricted to, like, if you're a level 1 BDSMer, these are the types of play that you do. And if you're a level 20 BDSMer, you get to do these things. Like, that shouldn't be how it works, because, again, it's all about the things that we personally enjoy for ourselves, and not about, like, externally signaling to other people, like, look at me, I'm this big bad pain bottom over here, and you can see that I'm doing this really complex thing, and that must mean that I'm totally somebody who knows what they're doing, because you might not be. Like, if you come across a dominant that is willing to look over the fact that you've been in the scene for 2 weeks and you want to do a really, really complicated needle play scene with them, like, yeah, you might be able to do that. It doesn't mean that you necessarily, have developed a level of experience that would mean that you're not a newbie just because you've done that. It just means that you've done a really complicated needle play scene. And I don't know maybe if this part of the rant makes sense to anybody else, but hopefully you can kind of see what I'm getting at with, you know, how the types of play that you do doesn't dictate your experience level. It's not about what you do. It's about how you choose to engage in your BDSM. It's about how you approach your play, not the kinds of play that you do. And with that being said, I think now is the time to move into the part of the video where I give you guys suggestions for ways that you can think about if you are transitioning from being new into the more advanced, the more intermediary stage of your kink journey. Now, these are just a sample of a few different questions I would ask, but it is also somewhat dependent on what you do within kink. Like, if you only do rope bondage, your questions might be kind of different from somebody who's a little, or a pet player, or somebody looking for an MS relationship, because, you know, different specialities, different things you might need to consider when it comes to where you're at in your process. So the first thing is obviously to know if you understand the basic terminology. Like, do you know what a safe word is? Do you know what aftercare is? Do you know what limits are? Do you know what boundaries are? Do you know what a negotiation is? Do you know what a scene is? All of those sorts of basic terms that we use in the kink community. If you're not familiar with those yet, you're probably still on the newer side of things and probably need to do a little bit more reading and research first. Are you familiar with types of play that you enjoy? Are you familiar with types of play that you don't enjoy? Are you able to communicate these things to a partner? Can you tell somebody that you were in a negotiation with some things that you might enjoy for play? Can you communicate what sort of feelings or types of connection or types of experiences you like to have in your scene? So, for example, could you articulate that you like feeling scared in a BDSM scene and then give some examples of things that might make you feel scared? Are you familiar with your limits, and are you also aware of types of play that might be outside of your current skill set? This is a really big one. Are you able to say no during negotiations? Are you able to ask for safe word usage? And do you feel confident that you could use a safe word if necessary during a scene? Are you able to speak up for yourself in general if anything makes you uncomfortable? Are you familiar with how play might impact your body? Do you know if you go nonverbal or if you go into subspace easily? Do you know what having a good time in a scene looks like for you versus having a bad time? And can you communicate those differences to a partner? Do you know if or when you get sub-drop? Do you know how long it typically lasts for you? Are you familiar with an aftercare routine that works to help you mitigate these issues? And can you give your partners any suggestions for things that you might need after a scene specifically for your aftercare? How do you approach play? Are you the sort of person who rushes into a scene right away the first time somebody asks? Are you really eager to play multiple times during a play party without giving yourself a break and running yourself into the ground? Or are you a little bit more methodical with how you approach play? Do you take the time to vet partners or watch them play in other scenes before you play with them? Do you have negotiation questions prepared for your partner? Are you a little bit more selective with the types of play you choose to engage in? And are you able to be honest with yourself about where your energy levels are? Basically, are you still in sub-frenzy or not? It's a really big one. Sub-frenzy can take quite a long time to get through. For some people, it's a month or 3 months or 6 months or maybe even longer than that. Are you acting impulsively? Are you acting without kind of really thinking about what you're doing first? Or are you taking time to kind of evaluate things with patience and realize that it's worth waiting to do the right scenes with the right people versus trying to do as many scenes as humanly possible with as many people as possible? Have you taken the time to familiarize yourself with the risks and best practices of the types of play that you enjoy engaging in? And can you use this to evaluate whether or not somebody has the skill set to play within the risk profile that you prefer? Now, this one is a little bit complicated because we don't really have a lot of bottoming focused education in the BDSM community, but you can do lots of things to educate yourself. I mean, I have an entire channel that's dedicated to videos for this. There's lots of other resources online, and classes are not just for tops. Even if you're a bottom, if you are interested in things like electroplay or flogging or anything else, even if you're going to a top focused class, you can still learn a lot from that in terms of evaluating kind of what you might need to know in order to engage in this type of play and evaluate the people you might be interested in playing with. And while I was preparing this video, I actually asked for some feedback from my patrons, and thank you so much for you guys who did. And one of my patrons came up with an amazing way of summarizing this, which I want to share with you guys now. Do I know what my needs are? And can I skillfully meet those needs through my actions and communications with my partners? And I think that's just a really, really good way of thinking about that. I mean, honestly, hopefully through this point in the video, it's been obvious. But the thing that separates being new into transitioning into a further part of your kink journey is having that introspection, is having a deeper sense of who you are, what you want in kink, what your motivations are, having a level of confidence, being able to say no, being able to stick up for your boundaries, having a level of self-knowledge about the things you want to engage in, like just kind of knowing who you are and what you're motivated by. I mean, when we're new, a lot of us do start out with some preconceived notions about things that we might enjoy and things we want to try, but we're open to a lot more possibilities because we're not really sure what we like yet. We're not 100% sure exactly what we're interested in. And as well, we're constantly being thrown and we're constantly being inundated with new ideas, new concepts, new scenes, new relationship styles, and it can all seem really exciting and overwhelming. And when you've been in the scene for a while, when you've been educating yourself, going to classes, discussion groups, actually practicing kink, you then start to kind of learn, okay, these are the things that I want. These are the ways that I've sort of developed my negotiation practices. These are questions I know that I want to ask DOMs if I want to play with them. This is how I vet people. These are the limits I have. These are the things I'm looking for in a relationship. And it takes time to evaluate all that. It takes time to develop it. And of course, even if you have been doing this for 10 years, those things are usually updated from time to time. Those things do change because we change as people. Our interests change. The things that we want in a relationship to change. It's just, again, it's about that introspection. It's about kind of being aware of who you are and what you want from kink, as opposed to kind of being bright-eyed and being like, wow, I don't know what all of this is and I don't really know what I want yet. And I think when you can kind of sit with yourself for a while and kind of ask yourself, okay, what is my current skill set like? How do I approach scenes? How do I negotiate with people? Am I familiar with, basic terminology and practices? That's when you can really evaluate, maybe I'm not as new as I used to be. Maybe I'm kind of getting my feet under me a little bit. And that's a wonderful feeling when you do make that transition. It can be so rewarding to be like, yes, I've made it. I'm no longer just a newbie. I have some experience. Yay, it's super exciting. And if you are finding that maybe that's where you're at in your kink journey, I'm so happy for you. I know it can seem so overwhelming. There's so much you don't know yet, but with time, it seeps into your brain. I don't know what else to tell you. It's a process where, for some people it takes a couple months, other people it takes a lot longer than that. And, everybody has their own journey at their own pace. And I think I have rambled for long enough. So hopefully something in this video made sense to you. Again, this is like the third time I've tried to film this and get these thoughts out there. So hopefully something in here made sense. Please let me know if it did down in the comment section below. And if you guys have had anything in your kink journey that you have really identified as the turning point between being new and being not new, I would really be interested in hearing what that is. If there's anything where you suddenly went like, wow, I suddenly feel like really confident and I feel like kind of maybe I'm getting the hang of this. If you guys have had any of those moments, please let me know down in the comment section below. If you like this, if you want to see more from me, please do subscribe. I make videos twice a week. And finally, if you really enjoyed this, if you want to support this channel, the best way you can do that is through Patreon. That is what makes this possible, and it is also what allows me to make you guys extra content. So if you want to see bonus videos from me going over subjects that I can't talk about on YouTube, if you like photo shoots, or you want to be part of an amazing Discord chat, all that is available over on my Patreon. Link to that will be in the description box down below if you want to check that out. If you already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.